Hi friends and welcome, my name is Angela and I am a list maker at heart. I love that feeling of making progress on something so much that I may add something to my list after I have done it just so I can cross it off. But I've started to realize over the years that progress in reading is not necessarily about the number of books, but about the direction I'm taking. This year in 2026, instead of just creating a book goal or a number of goals, I actually created an entire reading curriculum for my year. So before we get into my 2026 goals, I just want to have a bit of a reflection over my 2025 goals that I set. First off, I set a goal of 60 books that I wanted to read through the year, and I exceeded that by reading 68, which was great, but it's not the only metric that I use. And the reason I like looking back is that it's not just about the numbers, but it's about understanding what worked and what didn't work, and what kind of reading life I want to build. I prioritized deliberate nonfiction last year, which was a lot of it was around Australian and British history, because I want to keep learning. And I finally overcome my fear of big books, and I credit that pretty much entirely to The Secret History, which was one of 4 books that were over 500 pages that I read last year, whereas the year previous, I only read 1 book that was that size. So I really grew in that sense. I also set a goal to read 5 classics, and I read 3 of them entirely. And that was East of Eden, The Hobbit, and The Secret History. After a difficult 2024, I wanted my reading last year to be a little bit lighter, a little less emotionally heavy, and to find books that really lifted my spirits. And I think I accomplished that because Storygraph has this really cool graph that shows the emotional intention of your reading, and this year was a lot lighter than years past. But most importantly, I really do feel that I ran my own race. I read books that I was interested in rather than following trends or books that were currently in the zeitgeist at the moment. But somewhat unexpectedly, I did find myself reading quite a bit more fantasy and magical realism than in years past, and that was a surprise for me. One area of last year's goals that didn't go well was I hoped to lean more on free reading sources like the library. I did read more audiobooks that were for free, but I did not get into the library. I think it was a combination of wanting to have the freedom to annotate, to mood read, a few things like that. So it didn't go well, but I'm okay with it. Overall, in 2026, I am looking to read about 70 books. And to be honest with you, the goal of 70 books in a year is probably my cap. I don't know if in further years I would want to increase it, because I feel that doing so would probably sacrifice something. It would sacrifice my reading comprehension, or perhaps the things I do outside of reading would suffer. But my main goal isn't to read more, it is to grow as a reader. Which leads me into my first goal, which is consistency around reading every single day. To be honest with you, I'm a reader and I have a YouTube channel about reading, and I am not a great consistent reader. There are times when I can go an entire week without reading during the week, and then coming on the weekend, I'll probably sit down and spend a whole morning to read. And while that is nice, I want to be more consistent. I want it to be a part of my daily routine. So I'm aiming for 1 hour a day of reading, which is 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. It is perfectly achievable, and consistency is going to be something really important for my bigger project this year. Alongside my broader reading, I've chosen 5 titles that I would like to read this year, and I've kept this list deliberately small. The first is Persuasion by Jane Austen. This will be my second Jane Austen book that I'll read in its entirety, and I will pick it up in July for Jane Austen July. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. I read The Lost Daughter a couple of years ago and I liked it. Hopefully I will like this, which will lead me to reading the whole quartet of the Neapolitan series. The Fellowship of the Ring by Tolkien. I read The Hobbit for the first time last year, and I was so impressed about how less daunting it was than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to get into the Lord of the Rings trilogy, starting with this one. Ever since reading H is for Hawk by Helen Macdonald, The Once and Future King by T.H. White has been on my mind, and I am going to read this year. It is a big book, but I'm excited. And another book that is not, I don't have a physical copy yet, is Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. I've read an essay by Jamaica Kincaid once before, and I know she has a lot of garden writing, so I really want to start reading some of her books, and I think Annie John will be the perfect one to start with. And like I said, I've kept this list very small because most of my structured reading will be around this larger overarching goal I have this year, which I'll talk about shortly. I'd also love to host 2 read-alongs this year. I did my first one last year, which was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, and we had such a good time reading it. I was so pleased that a lot of people were exposed to an Australian author they hadn't read before, a book that was just incredible. So we're going to do another one in March and another one in the second half of the year. I'm going to be releasing a video later this week announcing the book for the March read-along, so keep an eye out for that. And this next goal is probably going to be the one that really shapes how my reading feels this year. Like many readers, my physical TBR has grown a lot, to the point some people may say it's out of control. But this year, I want to be more deliberate about the books that I'm buying. I would like to read books closer to the time that I purchase them, possibly reduce my TBR down to 2 shelves, and do a proper clean out of all of the books on my shelves in June or July, which is our winter here in Australia. I'm also giving myself the permission to DNF more regularly. I've always struggled with the idea of when is enough to say that I gave this book a fair chance. I recently heard of a rule from Amor Towles, the author, which really stuck with me. The idea is that you take your age and minus 100. That is exactly how many pages you should read before you decide whether you're going to finish it or not. The idea being that the older you get, the less time you have to be reading bad books. My magic number, I think, is going to be 50. I am not 50, but I'm close enough to it for 50 to be my number, and I think that'll work. It feels like enough to give a book a chance, but not too much that I feel like I'm really having to push my way through it. But my next goal, which is where my goals look very different to past years, because one book is going to shape a large portion of the books that I'm going to read this year. Many of the books that have meant the most to me over the past few years, including genres of philosophy, gardening, nature, and literature in general, keep circling back to this one piece of work, which is Paradise Lost by John Milton. After seeing it referenced again and again, I realized I really need to read this book. It's going to give me a refined perspective when I'm reading these other books that I'm really enjoying. But after my experience last year trying to read the Iliad, I know I can't approach this like a novel. It's not a novel, it's an epic poem. These books need time, they need space to breathe, they need space for me to think over what I've read. So with the help of AI, I built an entire month-by-month reading curriculum for Paradise Lost called Freedom After the Fall. The central question in this entire curriculum is, what does freedom mean once innocence is gone? And once I started building the curriculum around that question, things really started to fall into place. There's a month-by-month curriculum, and each month includes a portion of the book Paradise Lost by John Milton. There are modern philosophy and classic readings as companion text, and there's always one guiding question for that month to help me really dive into the content. For example, I just did month 1 of Paradise Lost. So I did book 1 of Paradise Lost. Then I also read a few selected chapters of St. Augustine's Confessions. It wasn't the entire book, it was just a portion of this. I've also read chapters 1 through 5 of the Screwtape letters by C.S. Lewis. And I also read Genesis 1 to 3 from the Bible. So all of that was creating the first month of this reading project. It might sound like a lot, and I don't want you to feel this is becoming super academic, because it's not. But I've developed this in a way that it is slow and manageable for me to be able to do this while also reading books for pleasure alongside it. Now, if you're not familiar with Paradise Lost, it is a 12-book epic that was published in the 1600s, and it is a retelling of Satan's rebellion, the fall of Adam and Eve, and the consequences of their choice. And across this curriculum, there are 25 companion texts, and what I really love about this is when I built it, I told AI the books that I had on my bookshelf that I wanted to read, and so I incorporated a lot of books already on my shelf. So this project isn't adding more books, it's really helping me get through these books that I own. In all honesty, it's about 5 hours commitment a week. It's probably going to be a third of my reading year. I'm not reading entire books. Sometimes it's just an excerpt out of a book or an essay. I enjoyed the first month. I'm looking forward to the next one. But overall, I think the goal isn't just to read Paradise Lost. It's to slow down, to think more deeply, and to become a more deliberate reader. And I will share a few updates on how I'm going throughout the year. So for me, 2026 is not about reading more. It really is about reading with intention. And I do want to say, if you're interested in this curriculum, if you want to read Paradise Lost and you would like this curriculum, please let me know. I'm more than happy to share it. And I'm even happy to share how I built this curriculum. And if all of this works the way I hope it's going to work, it probably won't be the last time I build a reading syllabus around a season or a big idea. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to hear your thoughts below. Maybe there's a book that you are looking to get to this year. I hope you have a wonderful week of reading ahead, and I will see you soon. Bye.